Welcome to the 16th episode of Make Pro Wrestling Majestic again. I am the uncrowned champion, Tiger Height.
I'm the actual champion, Peanut Gallery.
You are getting away with murder because you are not defending it for 2 weeks. So,
Yes.
because there are no pay-per-views or anything like that, no reviews, clearly. But we are going to be doing a promotion swap. I had to book a WWE event in the style of New Japan, and Peanut Gallery had to book a New Japan event with a WWE style. Let's start with Peanut Gallery. Also, there is no wrestling lesson or there's no heckling, just because there really isn't anything to bounce off of.
Right.
So, go ahead and lay out the premise for the card. Like, how did you book this?
Right. So, as was mentioned, I was given the task of booking a New Japan Pro Wrestling show like in the WWE pay-per-view style.
Right.
So with that being said, let's see. Well, so the WWE, the way in which they structure a pay-per-view is very unique. I mean, it's unique amongst a lot of major promotions. Let's talk about a few different things. Oh, by the way, can you send... I can't find my card. Can you send that to me?
Like this, okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I have it, but...
I know, but can you just send it back to me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Sorry. So, in coming up with I guess the pay-per-view for this, I had to consider a couple of different things, and this goes for both of our pay-per-views as well. Is that we had to, number one, we had to use the current roster, so that means that, you know, barring any special guest appearances or whatever the case may be, we could not use wrestlers outside of what limits were given.
Now, mine was a little bit easier.
Right.
I just sent it to you, by the way.
And the reason for that is because the big one is we had to use current rivalries.
Yes.
To base our pay-per-views
And mine was
off of.
different because I have, like, superstars that are only part-timers in there, which I did use them.
And so that was the first thing. The second thing was, you know, again, we had to use those different styles. So with WWE, the most challenging piece of it was that matches that I think would not be on pay-per-view
are going to be on pay-per-view.
Ended up going on.
And also you have to go into the premise that the entire rivalry is going to be immediately ruined with the lead up to it.
Right. So when we're looking at the rivalries leading up to it, you know, a lot of it is based off of what will be upcoming in the future. But, you know, when we're looking at the actual structure of the rivalries going into it, I mean, it changes a lot of things.
Right.
You know, obviously
There has to be a mindset shift.
Right. And the way in which this process is configured. For example, a lot of the pay-per-view matches from New Japan, a lot of those tag team matches that you see would have taken place on television as opposed to on a theoretical night one of a pay-per-view.
Right. Or, you know, well, the night one of a pay-per-view where I had to do that for the most part, where I had some restrictions.
So,
anyway, go ahead. Let's with a pre-show match as well.
So yeah, with that being said, that was one thing that I had to consider was there wasn't a night two, there wasn't a huge like hodgepodge of tag teams, and it really kind of puts a damper on things because New Japan is so centered on factions,
right,
and those faction rivalries that really a lot of the rivalries that come out through New Japan start out as factional rivalries.
Right. That totally is out the window right now.
So that's kind of where I kind of am going into this. So the pay-per-view that I have is an 8-match card with one pre-show, and we're going to start with the pre-show match, and I'm going to talk about the rivalry going into it and where I got this idea from. So let's start with the first one, which would be Sho and Yo versus El Desperado and Yoshinobu Kanemaru. Now, this one is actually based off of a budding rivalry that is occurring between these two factions.
Right. Well, they're off and on,
Right.
and it's like it's a pre-show, so there's no title because nobody has a champion now.
Right.
I feel like it's an appropriate place for it.
Yes, it absolutely is. And again, if this pay-per-view were taking place this weekend, I feel like this rivalry just reignited like a week ago.
Right.
So WWE would put this on the show in some capacity because we didn't have anything else for the pre-show.
Right.
So that was kind of my premise behind that first pay-per-view match. It was a pre-show match.
Right.
And that's what we have in lieu of a two-nighter, I guess, from that perspective. All right, so the first match on my main card is Lance Archer versus Hiroshi Tanahashi for the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship. We obviously know that there's a rivalry going into this.
Right.
Hiroshi Tanahashi issued the challenge
Right.
for this title, and that would be the first title on the card. I mean, it's a simple rivalry. I imagine.
And the thing is, with WWE style, they always start off with a workhorse title match.
Yes, they do.
Or a workhorse match in some way. So the last couple of weeks that we've seen the Usos and the Mysterios face because they have great chemistry.
Right.
With this match, I have that same kind of principle in mind when I saw it. I'm like, this would be, if WWE was booking a New Japan show, this would probably be their first match.
Yes, it would be.
Because they want to start off strong, immediately it collapses.
Exactly. So we're going to collapse into our next match, which is Toriano versus Chase Owens for the KOPW 2021 Provisional Championship.
I personally probably would have switched the junior tag and this one for this, so this one would be on the pre-show.
No, well, see, again, here's the premise behind the pre-show. The pre-show match is with a rivalry that has only been going on for like a week up to this point.
Well, I know, but this is bullshit, and it's for a stupid-ass trophy that doesn't mean anything.
Again, this is the collapse right here.
I guess.
This would be the collapse.
I'm just telling you how I would have booked it.
Of that first match.
Right.
And then the third match would be a little bit different, being Minoru Suzuki and Tomohiro Ishii. Again, this is a rivalry that's only been taking place for like maybe a week or two up to this point, but they would put that on the pay-per-view because they're two very good workers, but it's not for a title.
It's not for anything. It's just a match for reasons.
It's just a match. And WWE is very well known for those types of matches where there isn't really a lot of substance going into it. It really is just a lot of filler.
Right.
And I think that, and it would be kind of challenging. I don't know that this match would have been announced before the pay-per-view or not.
Probably not. I honestly think they would have announced the day of.
That would be so this would probably be in the day of announcement for this
just some bullshit
show
right,
because
exactly.
of reasons.
Right.
But it would still turn out to be a decent match. It's just and they would probably going into this, they probably would have faced each other 2 or 3 times leading up to this.
So nothing would have.
It would have been a nothing match.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Fourth match, we have the IWGP Tag Team Championship 3-way for the title. WWE is well known for doing multi-man matches. This is very unusual for New Japan, but not unusual for WWE to put a match like this together.
Right, so it probably makes sense. So it would be the Dangerous Techers, which are right here where I'm covering up.
Yep.
Los Ingrid Barnabas de Japón, the two in the middle, and then obviously Goto and Hashi, where they are actually doing this match here in, I believe, like the start of next month.
Yeah, the start of September, I think, is the first is that show. But again, this is again, like I said, it's very typical WWE style match.
Right. It's just kind of weird of it seeing in New Japan, which they're doing actually. So it's just kind of weird.
All right. So my fifth match would be Robbie Eagles from Takahashi for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Of course, it's one of 2 world title matches. They're always going to put the bigger title on the line at the very end.
And then they'll have the good workhorse match here. They'll have a piss break match and then the main event.
Right.
which is how they always do.
Right, but this I think is a very typical spot. This would not be the semi-ultimate main event or the penultimate match, but it would be third down the card because WWE always has that formula where usually they do a world title, a pisser match, and then the other world title match. They won't.
Right.
They tend not to do both world titles in a row. Now that rule has been broken a few times.
Right.
But it's been a very typical formula of the WWE to do one match, world title match, piss break, and then the last world title match.
Right.
Let's talk about
the piss break.
The piss break match. And this would actually be a last man standing match.
Well, but that's good because that prolongs the time so people can get whatever they need to do out of the way and still enjoy the match for what it is because the pacing is going to be different.
Right, and I'm going into this match thinking that they have already been butting heads a few times.
Oh, it's Kazuchika Okada and Jeff Cobb. You need to actually say who is actually in the match.
Sorry, Kazuchika Okada, Jeff Cobb.
You never know who's going to watch this, so we have to make sure there's context there.
Right.
So yes,
and then we'll do a replay of all the matches, after this. But my premise behind this is that they've been at it a few times. I think that a last man standing match. Now WWE does not do blow-off matches like they used to, but last man standing would be a great blow-off match. But knowing the they would probably continue this rivalry.
Right, and they would have a match the next night on fucking Raw where they would ruin everything.
Right.
Or they'd have some bullshit. It's one of the two.
All right, well, let's talk about the seventh and final match, the World Championship.
Shingo in the middle, Evil on the far right, and then Kota Ibushi right under my head.
Yes, and then this would be a triple threat match for the world title, of course. If this match were to take place next weekend and Kota Ibushi's not cleared to compete, we'd have a singles match between Evil and
I think that's
Hiromu.
the match now.
It is.
Oh, you're just talking about just in general.
In general, if theoretically Kota Ibushi was unable to compete, we just make it a singles match. But again, world title match at the very end of the show. There we have it.
Right, exactly.
So again, running down the card pre-show, Shogun Yo versus El Desperado Yoshinobu Kanemaru, Lance Archer versus Hiroshi Tanahashi, and for the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship. This is now the show itself.
Right.
Second match, Toriano versus Chase Owens for the KOPW Provisional 2021 Championship.
And I couldn't find a good picture of the trophy.
Minoru Suzuki versus Tomohiro Ishii.
Oh, whoops. There we go.
Zack Sabre Jr. and Taichi versus Sanada and Tetsuya Naito versus Yoshihashi and Hiroki Goto. Triple threat tag team match for the IWGP Tag Team Championship. Robbie Eagles versus Hiromu Takahashi for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Kazuchika Okada versus Jeff Cobb in last man standing match. And Shingo Takagi versus Evil versus Kota Ibushi for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Now, let's talk about, so we talked a little bit about the rivalries leading up to this point. Let's talk a little bit about what might happen after this rivalry took place. Or after this show took place. Obviously, I see the main event. Let's start with the main event. So I see the Shingo Takagi, Evil, and Kota Ibushi continuing this three-way dance.
Now, just keep in mind, we're in the perspective of WWE, so they would run this. They would run this exact match like 2 or 3 times over the course of a couple of months.
They would, and maybe it's a singles match the next pay-per-view.
That's constructed too well.
Right.
So.
Kazuchika Okada versus Jeff Cobb, of course, they'll keep that rivalry going.
Because of reasons.
Robbie Eagles for Hiromu Takahashi, they'll keep that rivalry going. Zack Sabre Jr., Taichi, again, this is one of those where I kind of see a 3-way dance taking place at some point.
Right.
I mean, it's just going to be a struggle between,
like all 3 of these teams, right.
I think that the fact that Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi are part of the 6-man tag team championships as well will probably play a role into this, but you never know.
Right.
That'd be too well constructed. Minoru Suzuki, Tomohiro Ishii, I expect to continue because reasons. Toriano, Chase Owens, I don't expect to continue because I think the KOPW 2021 championship is like the 24/7 champion. No one cares about it.
Right. And
Lance Archer versus this match. This I don't think will continue.
I don't
This
think
one
so either,
I don't think will continue after this pay-per-view. Showing El Desperado, Yoshinobu Kanemaru might get involved in the junior heavyweight tag team picture down the road, but you never know. So,
let's not play around with this stupid equipment.
I know. What are your initial thoughts on how I booked a New Japan pay-per-view as a WWE style?
Other than like some very minor adjustments, so I would have probably done something different in regarding to this match. I don't believe they're in a rivalry. I could be wrong. I don't follow New Japan every week, so that could be different.
Right. No, they actually just started this this past weekend. I was reading some news and catching up on things and kind of.
All right. Well, then if it is, then it is. I would have either done that. I would have done this match on the pre-show because it's so new, and then if at least if it's a not newly constructed, but a throwback to the original rivalry where there might be some title implications down along the lines, this one would have been on the main card.
Right.
That's what I would have done personally.
The other thing, too, the reason I put the tag team on the pre-show was because WWE does not like tag teams. They just don't.
They just don't, no. I think this one would... I mean, this one is fine, whatever. This one, I feel like they'd at least... I mean, I would hope that they would have the brains to incorporate this into the world title scene, but they won't. And then, now this one, actually, I would say this one would be like their contender for the United States champion if they were going to go for any title after this rivalry.
Right. But knowing WWE...
Knowing Last Man Standings, they generally stop with Last Man's. So
not always, though.
Unfortunately,
I can see them doing a steel cage match at the next pay-per-view for all we know.
Probably fucking on Raw. And then this one, once again, I agree with you. They would continue this in some way, shape, or form. Either they'd be singles matches or more triple threat matches, but they would not stop with this one.
So I just want to touch on a couple of other things here before we kind of take a break and move on to yours. So I talked a little bit about the fact that there's a lack of tag team matches, but WWE is very well known for not doing tag team matches.
Unless it's for titles or if it's on the pre-show.
Right.
Other than that, nobody cares.
Right. Obviously, no women's matches, which was actually the most challenging thing for me because I had to decide which matches kind of would be in that category.
Right.
Which is really unfair for me to say because women's matches do really well. As far as the athleticism and everything goes.
And we're not discrediting any, specific division about this, but you have to take into consideration that lack of women's division. What are you going to do with that space?
Right.
Are you going to consider the juniors the women of New Japan? That's not fair to either one of them because both of them do really well. But it sounds like we're just discrediting them, which we're not. The only thing that connects New Japan and WWE is their heavyweight scene.
Right.
So just by process of elimination, there has to be that kind of contingency.
And so when I tried to construct this pay-per-view, I had to take
given what you did, I do believe you did pull off a fairly decent card. I would watch the event personally. I would just know that WWE would ruin it immediately.
Right.
So
and so I think the biggest takeaway though with that being said is that the rivalries are, in my opinion, more on I think that WWE very much emphasizes the build-up to pay-per-views as opposed to starting or ending rivalries on pay-per-views themselves.
Right.
Which is something that they have done forever, but New Japan emphasizes the pay-per-views as opposed to the regular touring schedules.
Right, which I will be personally talking about.
So that's kind of what I got. Unless there's anything else, we'll go to break. But when we come back...
So when we come back, if you're listening to this on the podcast, definitely stay tuned for mine, which is going to be WWE wrestlers booked as a New Japan card. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll come out later, so feel free to subscribe to this channel, and we will be right back.